Hello there, my name is Eluukkanen, aka Eluukkanen, a composer from Finland. Today I have an excellent opportunity to interview a composer behind many tracks for Runescape and for other things as well, Mod Ian. And this is very interesting kind of chance we have had to do this, as I personally believe he has made quite a lot of tracks, and in just reading the information about his work, I've even noticed that I think he had made perhaps most tracks a video game might have had. Perhaps that kind of record has already passed or not, but still, the fact of the matter is he has made a lot of music, particularly for a game called Runescape. So, welcome, Mod Ian.
Hello, how are you?
I'm very, very fine, very excited to do this. And before going too much forward, I think we could ask ourselves, could you introduce yourself to people who might not know you?
Certainly, yeah, I am Ian Taylor and I'm a senior audio designer at Jagex.
What kind of duties are connected to that?
Senior audio designer, it covers all aspects of music, writing and sound effects production and integrating that audio into our products.
I see. How many people do you have working in Jagex for audio? Are you working yourself or is there a large team?
There's a team of 5 of us, so quite a small team,
But
considering
still,
there are over 400 people in the company.
Hey, Tristan, welcome to the interview. First comment we had. Yes, we are interviewing for people who just arrived, Mod Ian here, and he just told how his kind of he's working for the Jagex and the company for making audio stuff. I want to go into your history just as I think is very important for anyone to understand the character of a composer such as yourself. Why did you start? How did you start composing?
Well, I was always interested in music and sounds when I was a teenager. That's when it started. I think I was probably about 14.
14?
I wanted
right.
something like that. I played the electronic organ.
You played electronic organ?
That's my first, yeah, that's my first instrument.
Oh, pretty neat. So did you have did you play it yourself?
Two different organs.
Did you play in like just kind of practicing, or did you kind of perform somewhere or that sort of thing?
No, there wasn't any performance. It was just basically playing at home. This was obviously quite a long time ago now, and organs in the home were quite popular. So,
yes, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, it was 30 something odd years ago.
30 years. Oh.
Because I'm an old man now, so at least 35 plus years ago.
I just think that must have been a long time for all the audio, all the computer techniques and for composing. That must be quite different 30 years ago. Before 30 years.
Very much, yeah. I mean, obviously, computers. Computers were around when I was at school. The BBC computers and Commodores and Spectrums, and I had all these kind of computers as a child. Well, as a young man.
All right.
So I used to play games on them all the time, and I learnt obviously a little bit about computers at school. But yeah, organs were quite popular. They were quite expensive, but a lot of people had them in the homes. Mainly as pieces of furniture, I think, because they were very expensive. But that's
how expensive? Just a question: how expensive they were compared to? Oh,
I mean, they varied hugely. But I mean, some of these organs were thousands of pounds, British pounds, even back in the 80s.
Ouch!
Considering you could buy a house.
That's a lot of money. Especially all the inflation.
People were spending a lot of money on these instruments and paying for them over years and years and years. But I had a reason, but I didn't have a very expensive organ.
How did your organ playing connect to perhaps the future developments of making music? You mentioned computers. Did you use computers to make music? And if so, how did it start?
I did try, yes. That was around the time, well, that was about the early 90s, so that would have been around about the Commodore Amiga time.
I see.
With trackers called Octamed and various other kind of programs. I did actually have a synthesizer program on my old Sinclair Spectrum, which was rubbish really, but it was good fun to make silly noises with. Basically, I was just as interested in making sound effects as I was composing music. They were both, it was both together for me.
So those both were interchangeable. So you both were.
Yeah, that's right.
That was your big interest as well, not just composing, but the audio as well. Can you tell us something?
Oh
about
yeah,
that?
it was both, because I mean I was quite strongly influenced by synthesizers like Jean-Michel Jarre, who was a famous French composer, synthesizers, and various other people, as well as obviously computer game music. Some of the early computer game music and some of the classic games were the things that really inspired me and made me want to do this as a job.
What kind of games can you mention? Do you have any favorites from that period?
Yes, I do. My favorite game series, it's not around anymore, unfortunately.
Oh man!
But it was a game called Monkey Island. So it was the Secret of Monkey Island. It was a LucasArts game. They don't.
That kind of like
anymore.
a point-and-click game, isn't it?
Click adventure, yes, and
Yeah,
it was also. It was one of the kind of games that RuneScape wasn't. It wasn't made on the same style of the game, but it was certainly influenced by that game and the point and clicks.
So there was influence from that point. I see. Of course,
yes. The boss, Andrew Gower, who made the game, he used to love playing these point and click adventures. So that was one of the. It was to have like a game that was like a point and click adventure, but also playing it and have a huge long game, which of course is what MMORPGs are.
Indeed so. I think like interesting you mentioned these kind of point and click adventure games because in future when just looking at the RuneScape, it is kind of a point and click game to its roots. Of course, much more massive much more bigger in scale and such, but the point and click aspect of it, of course, kind of stays in there.
Yeah, very much, yeah.
Yeah, very much so. So currently, just people who joined, we are interviewing Mod Ian, yes.
Ian.
Mod
Yeah.
Ian, have to pronounce that right. So he's talking about his early music, kind of what he did. He played organ and such. You mentioned RuneScape, and I think this is kind of an inevitable point we have to get into your story when it started at Jagex team. I very much something that was when looking at the information about you, I would really want to hear that in your own words. Can you explain how did the process of getting into making music and sound effects for RuneScape, how did it start?
No problem. Well, I was looking for a job many years ago, and I saw an advert in our local newspaper.
An advert?
Customer support, yeah. In the back of the local newspaper was where all the jobs were posted, local jobs. And that still happens on some websites and some newspapers. And it was for a customer support new company for computer games called Jagex, and I was very interested in this job.
I see.
So I basically went to an interview.
How did it go?
During the interview, I also talked for quite a long time about my interests and sort of experience in making sound effects, because I'd tried, not very well, but I had tried to make games in my youth as well.
You had? What kind of games?
It was basic, but very using literally the basic language, a little bit of programming, mainly on the Sinclair Spectrum. So it was really simple kind of games.
But still, the Jagex took notice of your perhaps interests.
They did. Also, I suppose maybe a few years before I started at Jagex, I was getting very interested in pinball games, which there was a couple of programs online them, like a digital version of a pinball table. And I got really interested in this, and I made some of my own tables.
Oh, digital pinball
one of the
tables.
tables, kind of like I sort of made. They're not physical tables. Remember, these are just computer-based.
But
some of them were copies of real tables, and some of them were just things that people made. And I made my own table. What I made was based on this game, Monkey Island.
Ah, Monkey Island.
Which I brought a disc to my interview, and I said, "Is it possible I can show you some of the games that I've made?"
Oh man! And what did they say?
Because and Andrew was like, "Yeah, no problem, as long as I didn't put a virus on his computer or something like that." He was happy for me to demonstrate. But I used the pinball games to demonstrate, because I wrote music and put sound effects on them as well.
Can you tell about some of the sound effects and the music? What kind of tools you used for those?
I was using. I've had my first synthesizer. I had when I was about 15.
Oh, yes.
Electronic organ, but I really wanted to play synthesizers so I could make some crazy sounds as well.
And
it was a Christmas and birthday present and such. And I had a second-hand synthesizer. Loved, and I kind of, I learned more and more by reading and practicing. And
this must have been kind of like very, very interesting kind of stuff, because it was new and kind of different.
It was.
Just kind of a sideline question on this, and connected to, of course, what you said. How did kind of friends and family think of this kind of thing? You like focused on this kind of new computer games and all these kind of synthesizers and sounds. Did they? What kind of notion they were?
Very lucky, because my parents were, they encouraged me to do what I love to do.
Oh, that is nice.
I used to work for my own father. He had a camera shop, a photography shop. So I worked in his photography shop for many years. Obviously learned how to, work with retail. That's where I got my customer support experience from.
Oh, I see.
But in my spare time, I was playing with my organ synthesizers, and then I eventually, over a period of time, I got paid enough wages. I would buy myself more and more equipment, and I would learn it. And
so you would have this kind of studio of all sorts of computer
like
programs.
a bedroom type studio. And I've never really been in a formal band, but I did used to kind of jam and practice with people and try to get some. Never really got off the ground, so I spent most of the time kind of at home doing this stuff.
I see.
But it did mean that I learnt, because I was very interested in it, and I read a lot of stuff about it. A lot of knowledge over the years.
So you have gained a lot of like kind of independently working. You have not went to these kind of places where, or were there these kind of places or spaces where you could be taught of to learn these kind of tools, or was the self-learning only the option that was on people's hands?
Well, there were still, if you were really clever, which I'm not super clever, not clever enough to get myself a music degree or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
But no, computer games courses weren't really available at the time. Some sound, because I was originally thinking about doing sound engineering, which was working in a studio or working perhaps in concerts
with
or something
audio,
like that, on
sound.
mixing desks, and
right.
So it's all aspects of music technology that I'm interested in.
Ah, all right. So
that's what I kind of wanted to do. I didn't think I was going to do composing. I thought I'd probably end up as an audio tech, a technical person working in a studio or something. That's what I was trying to do.
So that was your main goal of doing, but you ended up making a lot of tracks in the end for Jagex. So after the interview, was it a clear cut? They just wanted you. Oh, we want to hire you right now. Or what was the situation?
Well, I suppose I was lucky, because I was the first person to have a job when the company was started. You see, so there was no one else there apart from the boss and his brother.
So it was that early on. Pretty lucky.
RuneScape had just become a members game. Now having a subscription service where people could pay and be a member.
And they had to kind of
content.
income to pay people to come and work. And you were one of the first ones.
That's right, I was. And of course, you know, my first job was customer support. So, you know, for at least a year or more, a year and a half, my first role was 100% customer support. As the company started to grow, even though we're a small team, everyone was expected to kind of everything that needed it. So I ended up working in development as well, doing some of the kind of development of the game. I built some of the areas with a map.
What time was
I
it?
wrote some of the
What time was
quests,
this when you developed areas and such?
Oh, this was probably, you know, the mid 2000s, something like 2005 or something. I started.
I see.
In 2003, so it's probably must have been kind of 2-3 years. So I was eventually, Andrew wanted to have music in the game.
And to this point, there was no music.
To give to the members.
So there was no music up to this point?
No, there was nothing. All there was about 12 sound effects, and that was it.
And you started the work. How did it go?
Started the work, yeah. So he said to me, would you like the opportunity to do some music? And I said, yes. So my time was making music, and 50% of my time was working on the development and also bits of customer support as well. I was doing a bit of everything, basically.
So because of the company was so young, you were able to try out these so many different roles instead of the company just putting you into one box.
That's right.
That is very interesting.
Everyone had to make an effort and to do what was needed because it was a young company. You know, we didn't have enough staff at the time, so it was expected that you could.
So was it that time a clear-cut situation that the game would be a success, or was it still unclear at that point?
It was still unclear, but the game, the amount of members started to grow very large, very quickly. And then we had to get off very quickly. So the company, it hugely accelerated within about 3 or 4 years. It was about 5 times the size that it was, you know, because we had a lot of people joining the game. That created a problem because I had this quite large game world with lots of different areas, lots of different towns and regions. It all needed music, so I basically just wrote in tune after tune after tune after tune, and then I would kind of discuss the tunes that I'd written with my boss, and we would say, you know, is this suitable for this area? And he would like, can you write me something else in here? And sort of churn through just writing. So eventually it got to the stage where I couldn't share my time between development, customer support, and audio because the music would never have got written. So I had to do music 100%.
So then you had to only focus on the music. Very, very interesting.
I only focused on the music, and that was probably at least 6 months to a year. I just concentrated on writing tune after tune after tune after tune, and that was when I was really, really trying to get them written as quickly as I possibly could.
Now we're getting
sizes. The file sizes of the tunes also had to be very small, 60 kilobytes. That's all we had.
That's so you had to really work hard to keep them low and still enjoyable. I want to still come to this kind of before you continue. For people who are watching right now, we are starting to get in the meat of the thing, as this interview is called. Runescape Composer, of course, he has done a lot of other stuff as we have discussed, but the Runescape kind of opportunity as described and currently is going into very, very interesting stuff, as Tristan here comments, interesting story so far from Mod Ian. And he just mentioned, before we of course continue, I want to say, if you have any questions or to say to Mod Ian after we have this interview section over, feel free to leave them in the chat, and we will be asking them kind of rapid fire sort of way to Mod Ian.
No problem.
That would be lovely. But yes, you mentioned there was this kind of difficulties, kind of challenges. Can you tell us more about those?
Well, yes. I mean, the challenge was to use the music was written in what you call general MIDI format.
Yes, indeed.
So, of course, most sound cards have this set of sounds. It's a set of 128 standard sounds.
And that's why you could. That's why you would able to keep the file sizes low, because all the sounds were already in computers. Yes, indeed.
That's right. So it was the data was just the notes. It wasn't the actual sounds data. Otherwise, it's much, much, much bigger. Now, of course, all the music we have in our game is all like CD kind of quality. So it's all megabytes upon thousands of megabytes. So, you know, we actually stream the music separately on a separate server now because there's so much.
It's so big. In the game. Oh, I see. So
we still have the Guinness record.
Yeah. So the record still is up. Oh, very, very nice. Very, very nice.
Yeah, we're.
How many songs do you have on? Or is it like in the both for RuneScape 2 and 3? How is it the combined?
Oh, it's about 1,600. I think it is now.
Oh, that is a lot.
So, yeah, it's a massive amount. That doesn't include also on top of that. That's just the main songs, if you like. Little kind of stings and jingles and some songs that just play in the background that aren't kind of like available to play separately because we have a little music player in the game.
Which games are you talking about? RuneScape 3 or the 2?
But it's both the old school RuneScape and RuneScape 3. They both have this music player, but that's where it kind of it came from originally from the old school version.
Of course.
So yes, there's actually a lot more music than is initially available. There must be probably close to about 2,000 pieces of music. I haven't written all 2,000.
So for my understanding, I'm not. Of course, I don't know everything about the game, but the music player is for the fact that people can listen to tunes that already have played. What is the purpose for those music tunes that are not in the music player? Are they very short tunes, or what's their purpose?
That's right. We have like jingles or stings, so that if you, for instance, because we have skills in the game that you can level up from, and like mining or something. Each time you level up, it plays a little jingle. But also some tunes because they're very atmospheric. Perhaps it accompanies a piece of content, into a cave or something, and we've just got some chords or something very ambient that isn't really a full piece of music. We might not add it to the music player.
I see, of course.
Like a song in its own right that sort of starts and stops and finishes, then yes, we'll add it to the music player and it'll be given a title, and then if you click on it, you can play it if you've got it unlocked.
You already touched upon this a little bit. The fact that the RuneScape, of course, the audio quality when the game went forward, you took this CD level of audio quality, which of course meant, as you mentioned, that it had to took a lot more server space to host all of this information. My question is that how has the development of the music, as I've understood, of course, you're still making the music and sound effects and such, of course, the team sizes have changed and the priorities might have just gone from there and such. But still the question is, how is the music development and audio development situation for RuneScape? How has it changed from beginning to now?
Well, we now have access to very, very good sound libraries.
Of course.
Which a lot of composers will know, like the Native Instruments suite. We also have the East-West Composer Cloud. Various different people have their own kind of favorite libraries. So in like True Strike and Symphobia and the Spitfire stuff, and it depends on who you are in the team. Some people have their favorites. We all have access to good instruments, good sound libraries, and the facility that we can also record ourselves. Some of the guys here, I mean, my main instrument is really keyboards, but I do play percussion as well to a.
How is you mentioned you played the kind of the organ in early years. How has it turned into when you started making composing, the actual composing process? Was it that you used synthesizers to play them, or how did you exactly put those songs together?
Well, I think I was never really good at reading music, you see. So I used to improvise a lot on my own, and I think it may have helped because
you improvise.
Sometimes when talking to composers, talk to odd composers who are very talented people, who are wonderful instrumentalists, but some of them say to me, I can't really compose my own pieces of music, possibly because of the discipline of having to play perhaps in a group or in an orchestra and playing to sheet music.
It's a very different thing. It is.
I mean, there's no way I could join in with an orchestra, really, to be honest. I can play in a band or something, but, you know, my is really trying to find these annoying kind of catchy that will get stuck in people's heads, and hopefully they will remember and perhaps have a bit of nostalgia for. So, you know, my direction was making things up from scratch, just making things.
So, connected to that, you mentioned improvising. How big a role you'd say the improvising helped you in composing, or was it just kind of like developing your? Yes.
Nearly all of it was really? Improvising, because I didn't have any formal education. I had to teach myself.
I would myself to say to that, like you mentioned before, like you didn't go to these kind of academies and such. I very much see. I've been talking with composers and such. I think the academy itself, of course, can help, but it's not a necessity for great music work. Of course, it can help in some areas and such. But I very much believe, especially with internet and such, and especially you working on so many songs for the Runescape game, you can learn this stuff yourself. Would you agree on that?
I had to because suddenly working on RuneScape. I mean, because I've always been interested in synthesizers and things. You know that. You know, I used to play some sort of traditional kind of songs.
What kind of songs?
Pop songs and things. Well, I did follow some sort of basic kind of organ like books to teach me chords and things like that. And it was songs like from older bands like the Beatles and just traditional pieces of music that you may have heard from years and years ago.
You enjoyed playing that?
I enjoyed playing them, but then I also, as I mentioned before, I also like the sound design aspect. So I wanted to kind of, you know, I wanted to try and make my own kind of like tunes with my own sounds.
Very much connected to
doing this job obviously helped that way. That it helped and it gave me practice. And of course, when I started working on the RuneScape music, I didn't used to write sea shanties or waltzes or ballads.
So you learned on the fly.
I was kind of like thrown into this situation, and obviously. Man. I'm lucky, but I've always liked lots of different kind of music, and genuinely, I used to listen to all kinds of stuff when I was a youngster. I listened to my parents' record collections and
what kind of music
records
styles
are you guys vinyl, but you know,
yes.
And they had like jazz, and they had popular music. They had like soul singing music, and they had Tijuana brass. I mean, they had all kinds of stuff. So, I mean, like they just had all these random albums, and I used to love listening to them. And I suppose, you know, having a good exposure to all kinds of different music, because this was the sort of 70s and 80s when, you know, music for the homes were becoming like, you know, everyone had good, like, you know, well, hi-fis they were called now. Then they're not really called hi-fis now, I suppose. You know, everyone's got really. Like a. But still. Everyone's got an iPod, you know, an iPod, some kind of like media player of some description, or an online service. Online services, you used to have to go into second-hand shops and buy these things.
That was a completely different world. The streaming has changed so much.
It feels like you know, going back to the dark ages or something. You know,
really?
Time.
You see, it's kind of like a bad thing.
No, not at all. No, I think it's, you know, I'm speaking really, you know, humorously. It's, you know, it's a very enjoyable time.
Of course,
the music in my dad's father's car. He had a tape player.
So,
like,
yeah.
You know, various different, like musicians, everyone from, you know, he had sort of Michael Jackson, and he had Paul Simon and Mike Oldfield. I mean, like, you may know some of the names.
Some of the names I know, yes. So you listen
essentially, I listened to everything I could listen to.
Just everything.
And I think just about everything. And I
that's the way.
You know, I just tried to have like a good interest in music. When I started for Jagex, I then started to listen to a lot more stuff, a lot more orchestral music, and also sea shanties, ballads, waltzes, and all kinds of different types of music that wasn't necessarily rock music or electronic music.
So a lot of music you kind of purposefully you took this kind of stance of learning as much as the different music styles to understand the kind of the environment you were in.
Very much so. That's the number one most important thing as a composer, I think, is listen to music.
Indeed, so
if you want to do something, and if you want to be rounded as a musician and have a good kind of outlook in music, you must get exposure to as much music as you can.
That is a very, very good advice, I feel. Of course, there are different kind of composing kind of ways how to compose. Some people, of course, do the traditional way, and some people do this kind of self-learning way, and just because of the situation, they just force themselves to understand the kind of. None of these are, of course, It depends on the composer what is the best solution. My question for you, because of course there are different ways to compose. If you get all range of just like you have everything on your doorstep, every single thing that you can just do with composing and audio editing and such. What is the composing style you prefer? What is the best optimal way for you to compose?
One of my goals is to try and make that people will remember simple melodies that will get stuck in your head.
Earworms.
When you walk away, earworms. When you walk away from the computer, you're going to be like, that piece of music was so annoying. I really hate it. That's when I've managed to do my job properly. When people are like, out of my head, that's the ultimate compliment, really, for me.
I think you have infected people's heads with your music. Quite so.
Yeah, perhaps. Hopefully in a good way. I'm sure that there's lots of people that would love to maybe at me and shout at me because of the annoying music. But
really?
Some people also like it. Oh, well...
Have you got any kind of nasty messages because of your music?
Really, no.
Okay, that was a very interesting kind of thing you said, because just looking at that, as you
players,
said...
they're really nice people, and we get some great compliments.
Oh, goddamn. Just a moment.
Bit weird.
We got kind of cut out for a second because of one thing. Are we still... can you hear me?
I say we're back again now.
I think we are back right again. Sorry for that kind of disruption there.
It happens.
Yes, indeed.
It
Indeed. I think it's kind of my fault. I left one thing over there kind of on. Oh, and everything is fine now. What were you saying? Let me just see if the stream's still on. I think it's, yeah, it is still on. All right, so what were you saying? Sorry for interruption.
What was I saying? Good question.
You talked about that people may look like what you did and such.
Oh, yes, of course, yes. The fans that we have of the Runescape music they really make my job and all of us, our jobs really worthwhile doing. Just to hear kind of like one person turn around to say, you had a special kind of place when I was a child. I used to love the music. I remember. It makes me remember things in my youth. I mean, that is the ultimate compliment, really.
It really
I'm
is.
Very, very lucky because computer game, you with lots of players, your music is heard by a lot of people.
You must have been, your music must have been heard by millions of people because of the game.
Millions, yeah. It must. Well, it must be. Yeah, it must be millions. So and it's very humbling, to that kind of feedback. As a musician, sometimes you have the tendency to be quite harsh on yourself. Obviously.
Harsh? How so?
Well, I mean, I don't really know many musicians who would truthfully turn around and say that everything that they've produced is wonderful. I think they're liars if they do,
I get what you're saying.
And as being critical, there's obviously lots of my original music that I would love to go back and maybe change, but I realised that for this music, the old school version of RuneScape that we've got still has the original versions of the music that I wrote 15 years ago in it.
They still have that.
Yeah,
one question we got to Reddit was that there were, I think, still some of the tunes that have not been remastered to the modern version. Do you have any plans, just connected to that question, do you have any plans to go back and remaster them and make them anew?
Well, we do. In the new version, I tell you, it's a difficult.
How so?
Because we want to remaster everything, but not everyone wants everything remastered. Yes, we have an old school version of our game, but even the people that play the more modern version, they still have nostalgia. They've still been playing the game for years, and they might not want things to be changed. So it's always a balance between the two.
Yes, indeed, especially when your game is so long running. There's so many people have invested so much time for it. Must be they've
invested a huge amount of their life in it, and we have to try and be respectful to that. But yes, we would like to do some more. I think the trouble is that even with 5 people, it's a small team.
Indeed, for thousands of
despite
songs.
People moaning, we do actually have a lot of updates to our game. Which means behind the scenes, we're often working on updates a long time before they're released. Nearly always got some music to write. Well, we're always busy. We always have something to do.
Always something new.
So we have to try and find the time for remastering.
I see.
Development work, you see. So it's not very easy to fit everything in at once.
Of course.
Obviously, the new content we must have. If it needs music, that must be written first.
Yeah, of course, before the remastering. Yeah, unfortunately, yes.
But yes, we do hope to do some more remastering in the future.
But my question is for you, the one thing which, of course, we talked about the process, what you did. You talked about your beginnings and how you got into the Runescape game as a kind of a sound engineer and composer, which is very, very interesting tale. But the question, of course, sometimes when there's art created, sometimes when there's music created, sometimes when sounds are made, the work process kind of is left off, of course, for obvious reasons. We want to see the finished product instead of hearing about this kind of how did the production how did people react to the music you did when you made it. But I think composers here would be interested to hear kind of the idea of how did the cooperation between certain people of Jagex like you and of course the leading members who decided which song is going to be included or not. Was it always a smooth process, or did it sometimes if you made a song, did you need to alter it sometimes, or did you make instant hits, or how did the process between you and the people who decided what music is going to be added, how did it go?
In the early days, initially, I just wrote lots and lots and lots of pieces of music. Most of them got used, not all of them. Some of them were just thrown away, deleted, or maybe changed. But at least maybe, let's say 3/4 or something of the tunes that I wrote were used. Like mainly it was Andrew, my boss, who was making suggestions of where he wanted to put the music. Bearing in mind that a lot of the music was written with a particular world in mind.
Of course.
So we have a spooky swamp that's full of ghosts and things. I'm not going to write a happy.
Of course not.
So I tried to write music by walking around the game, looking at the different areas and the graphics, and trying to get a feel for the area and trying to get that in the music.
So you took a lot of background work before you actually started the music. You went to the area, you kind of tried to understand it. Is that what you're saying?
As much as possible, yes. And really to get immersed in the game as much as I possibly could, so that I had a feel for the game. And yes, and then that hopefully it kind of, it directed me where I needed to go as much as possible. And I think that a lot of composers on games, the process is a bit different now because, of course, we have dedicated teams, much larger teams, but it all starts with inspiration, okay? If you want to write a piece of music for a piece of content, the first thing we do is we look at the concept art.
kind of get the feel. Yeah.
That way you can see perhaps what kind of areas may be designed, what kind of characters there'll be in there. Read the documentation that's provided, as the developers will be, writing all the things like, this is what we want to do with this quest or this area. And then it will eventually move on to the stage where we discuss with the content developers. And then we can let them have their ideas. Sometimes they're very some of them are more opinionated, and they might send some YouTube links or some Spotify playlists or something, and they're like, this is the kind of style I'd like you to do now.
Ah, yes. This is to
work collaboratively. So it's a bit of a relationship between the two.
And it has to be because of the big teams and such. Like I must believe it's not just like you make a song and then it's picked. It's very much back and forth, perhaps.
That's right. But we are still employed to be the people that write the music and make the sound effects. So we're still trusted to do this.
Of course, you have a lot of experience.
Content developer will have a strong. Some content developers will be like, "Can you just do something really nice for us?" And we will say, "Yes, we will do our best."
All right. So there's kind of balance.
We will let them backwards and forwards. We will play them our. What we sometimes do is perhaps a bunch of tunes as like a sampler or for inspiration for them. Not instead of writing full pieces of music, we will. Perhaps do a small medley of some different ideas ourselves, and then we can say to them, "Is this going the right direction?" And then we can get the yes or the no, or perhaps it might need a bit more iteration, a little bit more backwards and forwards, but we will get there eventually.
That is very interesting because, like you mentioned, we got a comment from Tristan who said the atmospheric music helps a lot in games. Going by visuals can help a lot. I agree, and I would agree as well. The one thing I've been trying to understand and listen different kind of composers, their styles, and understand what kind of process they took, especially in games which work very differently from films where the music has to fit exactly. My question to you still about the Runescape is that the music, the people have been, and you have been mentioning about the atmospheric part of it. When you made the music, what kind of considerations you had on the fact how the music would work with the gameplay itself?
There's one kind of trick that I do, which is one of my favorite things to do, which is because I'm often involved in the sound design as well. What I often will do is I'll make up a palette of sound effects. On a scary cave, I will use our sound libraries and I will collect a whole load of sounds together, and I will put together a big palette of sounds, atmospheric sounds of like running water and bats and rumbles, and then I will play that in the background, and I'll start composing with all the sound effects underneath it. That way,
that sounds actually pretty fun.
Because sometimes the music is approached from writing a melody. Sometimes the music, there's all different ways. It's not always the same method. We might start off with some interesting sounds or textures, and then they will develop into a piece of music.
I see.
Chords that come, maybe some involving chords with some beautiful kind of interesting sound effects, and then that will guide where the music needs to go, or at least it will help to guide.
Very interesting. This kind of a fluid way of you making the music, not just in certain structure that is just said. Okay, you have to do this and this and only. There's at least hearing what you say. There's not just one solution that is always used. Depending on the situation, you approach it from different angles. Very, very interesting.
I do try and write a lot of melodic pieces. So I will quite often make a loop or two, have something with a background, maybe with a bit of percussion and bass or something, and then I will jam over the top of it until a melody grows out of it, which I like, and then it will be, oh, I like that melody, that's a nice hook, let's go with that, let's develop that, and now let's grow it into a full piece of music. That's one of my favourite kind of ways to compose.
I see. So
there is obviously more than one way to do it, but you have to have something to kick the idea off initially, don't you?
So with you, the melody is the kind of the first thing you have to get right before continuing the song.
I think it does. I don't write all the melodies from start to finish,
of course,
like some people perhaps would. to have like a, as I say, I often have like a loop or a groove or something to give me a sense of tempo, set myself a key, a kind of time signature, and then I can just kind of have fun and let something hopefully will kind of grow out of it. I'll, playing around with the notes until you find like a sequence of notes and it's like, yeah, that's the sequence. That's what I want to use. But that may be just a small... The other thing that I do is, I sometimes have a very long kind of like session in Cubase or something. I might have 5 or 6 song ideas all in the same session, and then I can kind of jump around and I can, oh, that bit goes with that bit goes with that bit. Wouldn't it be good if I like took the end of that and stuck it onto, that kind of thing? So I have a big kind of like song palette. It's not just write one tune anymore. I try to approach it more, well, holistic in a kind of a more of a kind of like a wider way, so that I'm thinking about the whole piece of content.
Very fascinating to hear that the kind of the methods you go into the making the music, because of course, yeah, as you said, Kalek, in the comments, the Runescape Composer, he basically you take this kind of game like Runescape, which has to have a lot of music, and just developing it, of course, depends on the game situation, but also the very big thing on making it successful and something people want to listen is to really work on the kind of, not just like, okay, I just make a one tune, but you seem to say that there's a lot of background work behind that, a lot of it.
There is. Also, I think in terms of my own personal discipline, very hard to be disciplined to just write one piece of music, start it, and stop it. Initially, at least, I will be jumping all over the place with different ideas, because I'll kind of think too fast and I'll be like, I just got to get those notes down. Oh, no, let's just do this now. I'm bored of this now. And I'll keep jumping around and building up a big kind of palette of songs, and, and then I kind of like, then it starts to glue itself together over a period of time. And then once I have a good amount of ideas, then I can kind of listen to it through and I can go, oh, I know where it's going to go now. Otherwise, it's all an uphill challenge. Do you know what I mean? It's all discipline. You'll have to be...
Of course, the inspiration all alone cannot just drive you, especially when you do this kind of work. I agree on that.
Oh, that's right. I mean, obviously, many times I just look at my, my sequencer or whatever, and I'm just like, scratch my head with a blank. Okay, what am I going to do? And then I will start to, look at the content, start getting some sound effects, start playing with some sounds, and out of that.
I see. People, I think it's very interesting to hear this kind of the aspect, like many times, very much something that interests me, and I think many composers, where the background process for creating the music. It's kind of a different view from the fan and the one who's like the composer when they look at the music. I feel, and I think sometimes I've seen some game composers being interviewed. Of course, they ask good questions, but very much the kind of the idea how they ask it, it's very much on the kind of fan side of things. I think this is very, very vital to hear from Runescape Composer Mod Ian, his kind of background idea and thinking about this, because then other composers who are watching this right now, like Tristan and Kalek and such, they can understand and get into the kind of the methods you do, and perhaps that might help them out.
Hopefully. I mean, it's important to try and develop your own style. I think because I never really kind of, I didn't really play with many groups, bands or orchestras, and I wasn't very good at reading music, I was so fantastically technically proficient that I could then start to kind of like, like accompany people when they're doing, concertos, but I found that I didn't really copy very many people. I had to kind of, do you know what I mean? It was more my own, because I was doing it for myself, if you understand.
I do understand it, because the kind of styles and things you learned in universities and such, sometimes they can, if you don't try to get yourself just removed completely when you make your own songs, sometimes they might influence you in ways you might not notice, possibly. That's right. I've noticed for composers who have not went to these places, that of course there might be more, perhaps a bit more struggle to understand because of course in universities, academies, you can learn a bit easier with a group and such. They help you out in that, and of course you can still make interesting and enjoyable music out of that.
Education is very important.
Very important. But
I mean,
I've noticed,
if I could do it again, I would love to have had more education. Really.
Oh, really?
I mean, being a keyboardist and is that after a while, because you can make pretty much any sound, with drum machines and effects units, synthesizers, organs, everything, doing more yourself. So you end up, perhaps not always, but sometimes you actually collaborate less with other people.
Oh, really?
Because you could do it all yourself. So why would you then like to, perhaps if you're that drummer, no, he's playing the rock. I don't want the beat like that. I don't. I maybe and you end up perhaps a little bit of a maybe like megalomaniac.
Kind of a bubble with your music. Are you saying that?
Yes, and maybe a bit opinionated. Because you can do it by yourself. So I think that's I think that can affect quite a lot of people who
that might be a dangerous position, perhaps if you are not aware of it.
Can be. So I do quite enjoy when we we kind of work with other people sometimes.
What kind of working with other people things you have?
With some of the tunes on RuneScape 3, we actually brought in a number of musicians.
Oh, really? Tell me about this experience.
Yeah, we actually when we were remastering some of the early music, we had various different musicians in, kind of like violinists, string quartet, accordion.
You can notice them in the tracks.
And yes, I didn't write sheet music for them as such, because we tried to get people that could improvise.
I see.
I sent them some examples, and then perhaps I would give them a version of the music, and I would leave the instrument out. Like, let's say for a flautist, flute player.
Yeah.
Give them the whole tune, and then I would give them another version with no flute, so that they could listen and perhaps, if they have the time, practice. And we try to employ, for people that have done this work for us, we look for people that are capable of doing this kind of improvisation.
I
need note by note by note on a music, but a sheet of music, but they're capable of following a tune, and perhaps by ear.
Of course, there are many talented musicians that can just listen a melody here and there.
Many.
They can just start doing that.
Some of the people we've worked at, and that's really enjoyable, because then you can let people kind of put their own flavour onto their instrument. Instead of saying to them, can you just play these 10 notes? I might say to them initially, can you play the 10 notes? But next time I was like, can you play the 10 notes? But if you want to put some notes in between them, just feel free. Just do what you want.
Improvise in between. Oh, very, very nice.
At the end of the day, I think that's what really gives value to music. No one really wants
the human value. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I like dance music. I love electronic music and synthesizer music. I'm quite happy to have robotic music, but and produce music as well. And it's what gives music its human character. You need someone's input. And it's a collaborative process.
Otherwise, it's just a machine, kind of people machines playing the music. There has to be some kind of you mentioned about the collaboration with musicians, but you said you have 5 people right now on the audio team. How is the collaboration between all of you 5?
Oh, well, I mean, we do often kind of work together. Like, I can't play the violin, for instance.
I see.
So I will, if I need a violin part and when I want to have it kind of like recorded, I will ask my friend in the next room, Slippers, if he would please come and do some violin for me. And we will ask each other. But we do also work on kind of, sometimes we're working on different projects at the same time, so that's perhaps not possible. But yeah, we do try and kind of encourage each other and where possible.
So all of you have this kind of...
It depends on our workloads, really. It depends on how much work we've got on and what the kind of thing we're doing.
Of course. So all of
working
you
on
have the
something
kind of
completely
different goals. Like of course you do audio, but you have all kind of different. Like he does that, she does that, he does that. Sort of that kind of mentality.
And it's not strictly that one person will do one thing. I mean, we do share roles. You know, it may be like, you know, for the next 3 days, I'm working on atmospheric sound effects for a volcano.
All right.
The other guy's working on like a nice gentle piece of music, and then the week after, sound effects for I don't know, you know, a boss fight or something. Then I could be writing the music for the boss fight.
So
we meet in the middle. So it is collaborative, but we all have our own disciplines, if you like.
That is very interesting. So, like, you are not all the time you don't have board meetings in kind of with 5 of you, but you do different things, but still you sometimes those interests kind of align.
What we do sometimes is if we do kind of offer up a piece, if we want to have some critical input, you know, any of us at any time could say during, let's say, a team meeting, which we often have on Mondays,
yes,
written a piece of music for something, can everyone have a listen to it, please, and give me some feedback? In which case, we do listen to each other's music, and then we can go, oh, I really like that trumpet, but perhaps it was a bit too loud or something, or, you know, or that's fantastic, or I don't really like that part or something. You know, we try to be, you know, give some constructive criticism. There's no point in kind of tearing someone's work down, especially if it's, we're always, you know, willing to offer a little bit of assistance to each other. At the end of the day, we are a team.
Man, like you describe this kind of workplace and the work methods, and you do. That sounds like a dream composing job, I must be honest. Because you have this big game with all sorts of different areas, different world spaces and such. And you have this kind of course you work with that team, and that team has to also approve your work. But there's a lot of space you can move inside of the space and make the music you really want to make. That sounds pretty nice.
At Jagex now for around about 17 years.
Oh,
so
man.
That's the reason why I'm still at Jagex doing what I do, because it is really a great job and I do love what I do.
That is so just you saying you have been on there 17 years. What is your future goals? Are you going to continue as usual and of course making more great things in Jagex?
It's a good question. I don't know if I've got a 100% answer for it. I mean, at the moment, I'm quite happy, but yes, perhaps in the future, I'd like to maybe do something different.
I see. What kind of things you have in mind, if may I ask?
Well, I would, in some ways, I would kind of like to perhaps get more involved in maybe demonstrating, maybe a little bit of kind of teaching. I mean, I'm not really that formally educated, as I mentioned, but I feel that I can still perhaps teach a little bit. I can demonstrate.
Well, the experience you
I'd like to share a bit more of my knowledge with people.
You should.
I would like to be able to perhaps encourage more people to do something that they would love to do in life, because I've been very lucky with what I've been able to do. So I'd like to share that a bit more.
But still, of course, it's not just the luck. You have to, of course, work hard. And I bet you that must have been sometimes difficult, even situations. It's not just dancing on the roses, I must believe.
Oh, no. I mean, absolutely. I can't, I have to, you have to be realistic. I mean, you do have to have some talent, obviously. But,
Of course.
Quite willing to turn around and say, yes, not everything I do is great, but some of the things I do I like as well. So now I must warn you that if you remember, I said around about 6:30 we're going to have.
Oh yes, of course. That's why I wanted to bring this kind of.
We've got about 10 minutes left. If you
let's do rapid fire questions, and I think we're able to get this over with before 10 minutes. I tell you, before we do. It has been very interesting, as we have people just like in the comments, Kalek saying, as a GSC music student, I would be extremely thrilled to see online courses or series of videos explaining how you entered the industry. And I would agree on that. I think it's something you had that knowledge. Do share it. I think very much. Perhaps, of course, that might not.
It's something I think I do need to do something like that in the future. I mean, the trouble is, because I'm quite busy at work.
Of course.
I mean, I do have a family, and I I also have
that as well.
of hobbies. You know, I mean, I kind of collect synthesizer sort of equipment as well. So, you know, I've got all kinds of like musical gear, my bedroom and what have you. So, you know, these are all interesting to me.
Yes, I would say that go with that if you have the time, of course, depending on the work. Let's go rapid fire with the questions and then let's end this. It was a very pleasure to have you here. There's a few questions we got from Runescape Reddit, which I think we should go through. If I put some questions that were just like, is there at least any sounds in the Runescape? I just threw those off because of course there are, but there are some which are very interesting. One big question from Fight the Tag Reich was, there's a lot of songs that are often heard once and never heard really again due to being part of dead content and quest. What songs are you particularly fond of, definitely on that are underheard?
I suppose, yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, because I've written quite a lot of songs, I don't remember all of them. So from time to time, I listen to some of my older music, and then I might, if I'm looking for some ideas, occasionally I can get some ideas from something older. Like some of the jolly, happy kind of songs, maybe some of the sort of songs from perhaps like the kind of dwarves, the races.
So there are some of the themes that perhaps are like left behind, and perhaps there would be use for them in the later, who knows?
No doubt there's some tunes that I like which are perhaps a bit more quirky or humorous that I like that maybe not very many other people like, but
Indeed,
that's fine.
so. That is fine.
What we don't want to do is just take old stuff and kind of like keep on.
Yeah, because
we want to try and do fresh things.
Indeed. The second
it's a
question.
very good question.
Yes,
yeah.
Indeed, it was a good question. I think it was a little bit longer. There was like three same questions about the same.
I think I could spend a lot longer on the answer.
I think you could, but unfortunately, as you said, you have one thing you have to go to. But let's go to the second question. Jagex asked, would you like to see music that currently is used somewhere in the game again? Kind of same kind of question. Would you like to...
Yes, as long as it was perhaps not. I don't think I would just like take it and use it elsewhere. I'd like to perhaps maybe do something to it, maybe remaster it, maybe reimagine it, and perhaps use somewhere. So let's say, you know, like an old kind of like piece of content, and we maybe do an update. I don't know. Let's say this is maybe not the best example, but perhaps let's say the God Wars or something. Maybe the first kind of couple of pieces of music, perhaps we could, if we did something else with a brand new type of God Wars motifs or some kind of.
So, so there's no clear answer, but perhaps there are positions you would like to be happy having those.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be happy to reuse. I mean, I think it's important to kind of like reuse some parts of the music because it gives a sense of sort of continuity and familiarity.
Indeed so.
Before, you know, you want to put fresh stuff in the game as well.
Of course, of course. The third question is from you, Shadowa. In what activities does Mod Ian like to participate in order to boost his creativity?
Well, I collect and restore machines. That's one of my biggest hobbies. Yeah, so I've got the full-size cabinets like the kind of Pac-Man type cabinets and things like that they used to have in art.
Very different from the composer. Yeah.
That is a kind of cross-discipline because I like kind of like restoration and things like that. So I try to do a lot of work on my machines. And
I saw some pictures in Twitter. Were those? My
machines, yeah. So some of them weren't working, some of them were, but they're a great bunch of guys. That and there's a lot outside of work even today, so that's still very much a big hobby.
But it takes kind of gives creativity to the music. Okay. The next,
I think it's a good hobby. Yeah.
Of course. The fourth question, and still there are a few ones. Rafa Sheep, is Flute Salad ever going to get a new version? Flute Salad.
I think I've heard that. Yeah, I think it must. One day, I think it has to.
Flute Salad, bring us the flute.
But whether it should, but it's a difficult one. Should we remaster it? Should we just make something completely different?
Yes, of course. Depends.
I've had this question a number of times. I don't know if there's a definitive 100% yes or no.
We shall see.
I think If you sort of force me at gunpoint, I think I'd say yes.
We shall. Hopefully, we don't get that far. There's still one question which I think was interesting. Can we get full soundtrack to Spotify? I'd love to listen it. Says God.
Well, there are a number of tracks on Spotify. I mean, the full soundtrack on Spotify is going to be a huge job.
Of course.
We do need to do a certain amount of kind of like preparation for the audio.
Are you going to kind of release it kind of a part 2, part 3, some kind of a volume?
More coming, yeah. There'll be more coming soon, and that's probably all I can say at the moment. But yes, definitely we'll have some stuff.
Still few things if you have time. Do you have time? Still few ones.
Literally got a few minutes left.
Okay, a few minutes.
I'm just worried that all of a sudden I'm just going to kind of cut off as they turn the
All right, no worries. Do you start with a key or a signature when you try to figure out what you do? Just a quick answer.
I generally tend to start with like maybe like a tempo, a beat, and then I will hit a few notes until I like the key that I like.
All right, good.
I'll start. What I often do is start one key, and I usually end up about 3 or 4 keys different.
All right, good. Still, we won one, and then we say goodbye. What is the favorite music style to write music?
Happy, quirky. I think that's probably my #1 style.
Happy and quirky.
Because it's good fun to. Although I do like a lot of kind of like the darker stuff, and I like everything as I mentioned, but the happy music writes itself a lot easier.
I bet that.
At least I hope if you've got something catchy that you like and you're kind of humming it just kind of it's easier to write, I think.
Indeed so. But hey, sorry if we have to quit this. Unfortunately, there might have been something we could have discussed more. But it was lovely to have you even this long. You are a busy man. I hope we can have.
You're very welcome. I mean, obviously, I do have my my Twitter account. Anyone's welcome to get in touch.
Of course, go to Ian Mod Ian's Twitter, which is address is I think. At Jagex INT. Go there, have discussions more with him. He's also in eluukkanen server. If you use Discord still after this interview, there might be some questions coming to your way from that.
Yeah, I can look at the Discord again. Like, I'll check it again tomorrow. People can leave questions here.
That would be lovely. Thank you for so much coming here, and all the best for you, all the future ventures, whatever
and
they may be.
You're very, very, very welcome. And thanks everybody for listening to the game and making our jobs worthwhile.
Indeed so. Wherever you are,
cheers.
Have a good time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So that was that composer interview for Mod Ian for Runescape. It was lovely to have you watching, of course, this. Tristan and Kalek actively commenting on this from YouTube and other places. D-Live, yes. Very, very lovely. This guy is, I think, a fascinating man in how he started his job, how he started making music. And as you perhaps learned, there might be opportunities for people who might not go to these academies in the first place. Of course, that does not make that those people who go to academies, they might do bad music or vice versa. It just means a different kind of opportunity, different kind of way how things go. I think because of that, the unique story more Ian did and how he got into Runescape, and I think just listening his description on how the music making is, it's kind of a dream job for composer. Kind of like, why would he want to leave? Because there's a lot of music, of course, being needed for the newest versions, and it's a lovely job. It seems like it, and he has a good experience with that. So, very fascinating to hear this kind of take on this composing thing. Thank you for tuning in. If you like the eluukkanen content we do, interviewing more composers in future, I'm trying to connect few ones. There's this one which has made music for Lara Croft series. We might see where that goes, and of course all the composers as well. If you like the content, please like it, please share it. Thank you for coming, wherever you are, whoever you are. I wish you a good day. See you later. A brilliant writer, and he has very interesting story, how he started. Many thanks for the interview and the stream. Thank you very much for coming. Please, of course, that helps if you share this around a little bit. The algorithms kind of hate me if I just, of course, likes and such, but shares, that is the key. If you want to spread this around, the information, you may do with that. But yes, let's continue the discussion wherever you are, whoever you are. I wish you a good day. See you later.